Good afternoon. It is Tuesday, March 18th, 2025. It is 4 o'clock, and this is a regular meeting of the Jefferson Public Utility District Board of Commissioners. My name is Jeff Randall. I am president of the board and calling this meeting to order. Jefferson PUD will be offering both virtual online meetings as well as in-person meetings unless advance notice is provided. Online participant audio will be muted upon entry. Please unmute at the appropriate time to speak. And if you're calling in, use *6 to mute and unmute and *9 to raise a hand to request to speak. So let's do a roll call of commissioners. My name is Jeff Randall. I'm commissioner for District 1 and president of the board.
Kenneth Collins, Commissioner, District 2.
Dan Tupper, Commissioner for District 3.
Okay, and I understand we have a few tweaks to the agenda. Staff has requested that we remove item 8.1, the MRSC resolution from old business. And what's the plan on that? When is that going to come back?
It will come back. I
Okay.
had some questions for Joel the end of last week that.
Just not ready.
Just not ready.
Okay. And then just for Ken's heads up, because I didn't see it on there, 8.4 is review of the general manager's job description and advertisement. And the intent of that item was to review the changes that Lee Taylor had made and just emailed to us earlier today. So Dan and I have had a chance to review that, I think, but Ken may not have. So anyway, we'll see.
So I have reviewed the advertisement, but not the revised job description.
Okay.
We can go through it.
Okay. So that's the roll call.
So I'll make the motion to accept the agenda as amended.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the modified agenda. Please indicate by saying aye, approval of the agenda.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that is done. The next item is the public comment period, which allows members of the public to comment, limited to 3 minutes each, on any items not specifically listed on the agenda or for items listed on the consent agenda. Prior to any public comment, members of the public must first be recognized by the president or the designated chair of the meeting and are not permitted to disrupt, disturb, or otherwise impede the orderly conduct and fair progress of the commission's meeting. After an initial warning by the president, individuals who intentionally violate these guidelines through actual disruption of the commission meeting will be dropped from the meeting. So if you want to talk about something that's not on the agenda or that is in consent agenda, now is the time to speak. Do we have anyone who would like to comment? And I'm not seeing any hands. There's nobody in the room. We got one.
There's a hand.
Is that Roger? You're up.
Yeah, a couple of questions. First one would be about the capacity fees in the hospital. It seems we stand to make a lot of money in capacity fees when that project goes through. How much money is that? How much money do we make on that? Or would we make on that? Or anyway, that's my first question.
Okay.
The second question is about our letters of credit. What's the duration and rate that we're paying on those, and I guess cost of capital too, versus the opportunity cost? I guess where I'm going is, if that's a good deal, would it be a good idea to take out another one? Those are my questions. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm going to summarize those as, is it public information if the hospital paid any of the capacity fees under our new ordinance, or if we adopted it after the project had gone through, or if there's a future hospital project that we're aware of that would trigger capacity fees? And the second question was about the cost of borrowing, and we haven't taken out the line of credit yet, so we don't know what that interest rate would be because we're not using it. And I'm not sure. I assume it's kind of like a credit card. You borrow the money, you pay that interest rate as long as there's an outstanding balance, and maybe Mike can touch on what the rough rates are. And then this other question about borrowing bigger chunks of money from like RUS or one of the private banks that we can work with, what, we are aware of those interest rates. So that's Roger's comments. I don't know if staff wants to wait till you get to that, or you want to just take it on now.
Hospital was, the work order was created prior to the capacity fees being adopted. So
Okay.
they did not pay any capital fees. Mike can address the letter of credit real quick.
So yeah, the letter of credit is just, unless we borrow the money, there's no interest, there's no fees upfront for it. But yeah, it would be whatever it was at that time. We'd lock in the interest rate at the time that we borrow the funds. It's the same way with the RUS funds. Is when we draw down the funds, we lock the interest rate in at that time.
Yeah, and then the letter of credit, it's probably like prime plus something. Do we know what that is? The something?
I was trying to look at CFCs real fast and I'm not.
Okay. So Roger, we're sorry we can't throw a number at you real fast because we actually haven't borrowed anything. So it's at this point still speculative.
Well, what's the cost of the line of credit without borrowing?
There is no cost. It's like a credit card that you have that you can use, but there's no cost as long as you're not using it. So there's zero balance, there's no fees, there's no interest.
I see. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for the question. Okay, anybody else have any questions for items not on the agenda or on consent? Going once, going twice, sold, we're off of that one.
I have a question. I'm sorry.
Oh,
I apologize for this, but did you remove the discussion
MRSC?
and approval of the job description for the general manager from the agenda?
No, that's on the agenda
Thank you.
where it was. We just removed the MRSC item.
Got it. Appreciate it.
Okay. All right. Next one is manager and staff reports. Kevin.
Okay, we're gonna start with Mike. He's gonna talk about our cash reserves.
Uh-oh.
So one of the things I've started doing for Kevin is every Monday I give Kevin a kind of a breakdown of where we're at on cash reserves. So as of yesterday, with what we had, we technically have 18.2 million in the bank, but by the time we took hold of between restricted and unrestricted cash and stuff coming out, we only have our available unrestricted cash is $9.9 million right now, as of yesterday.
Quick question, Mike. When do the BPA power bills at the end of March? Is it quarterly, right? Is it
No,
beginning April?
that's RUS is quarterly. That actually includes the 9.9 we paid. We actually paid BPA yesterday. It came out of our bank account yesterday. So the 9.9 was after that came out.
Yeah, because in the
So-
vouchers, that wasn't in the vouchers that we saw from the
No,
package. So that's
yeah.
why I was curious as to what all went into that $9 million mark.
Yeah, so no, that was after we looked at taking how much we had for between in the bank, then subtracting out the difference between the unrestricted, the restricted, and then what was coming out yesterday. And one of the things that we paid yesterday was the 1.9 million for BPA.
So, and at what point does our power cost, when do we make those payments to BPA? Is that monthly, quarterly?
Yeah, no, BPA is monthly, RUS is quarterly. So at the end of March, we'll have roughly 1.5, 1.6 million dollars coming out again for RUS. And around the 15th of each month is when we pay BPA. And that's usually upwards of, it could be close to 2 million, 1.5 to 2 million, depending on the time of year it is.
Right. So again, I'm just trying to get trajectory wise here. I'm trying to look at what's coming up, where we're at, and what's coming. I know next month you'll probably do this similar. You'll probably give us the same kind of thing. It sounds like that's what you're going to
Yeah, I think this is something we're
incorporate
gonna-
into this report. So I guess the other question I have is on the broadband side. I mean, we're pretty low on vouchers this month. So is there another big draw coming for broadband related for, installation, construction, that sort of thing?
Yes.
Okay. So again, just trying to understand what trajectory we're on from this point of what's coming up. So.
Yeah, and those are have been monthly. They've kind of slowed down a little bit because of construction, but as they're wrapping up and Vinley's wrapping up, there might be a few more coming in.
So we could be looking at 4 or 5 more million in the next 30 days. Is that
No.
Not quite that much.
well? You have 2 million, and when you figure transmission and power, that's about 2 million this time of year because the meters are turning. And then you've got the RUS, which is 1.5, but we already paid that, so that wouldn't be coming up.
Yeah, the RUS is coming up, and then next in a month, in the middle of April, we'll have the BPA again. So through the rest of March, you're looking. The big one is just the RUS payment at the end of the month of around 1.5, 1.6 million.
And then, like I said, next month we'll have 2 million on BPA, and then how much on broadband? You got a number you wanna throw out
I'm
there?
gonna talk a little bit about broadband
Okay.
in just a minute, so
Okay.
if you can wait.
No, just trying, like I said, trying to understand the trajectory and when things are gonna hit. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, let's rein it back in. Staff, oh,
Okay,
I think there's a question.
is there,
Roger's got his hand up.
Roger, did you leave your hand up accidentally or do you have a question?
think you left.
No, I lowered it.
Okay.
No, I have a question. I have a
Oh,
question.
okay.
Does the
I will entertain.
does the 18 million in restricted and unrestricted cash include the 5.6 million in deferred credits?
Mean the
The line?
deferred credit? Mean the line of credit?
On our balance sheet, we have for the electric, we have 5.6 million in deferred credits, which we haven't
That's-
spent yet. Is that included in the 18 million?
No, this is just money in the bank. This doesn't, that's an accounting thing that you're talking about, Roger. It's not any of the cash or anything. That's just stuff that will come out later as a non-cash expenses.
It's money that would come out.
They're non-cash
Could it
expenses.
be depreciation is that something that
It's
depreciation would fill
with-
up?
I don't have it pulled up right in front of me, but it's dealing with pension liabilities and adjustment, Gatsby. It's the generally accounted standard boards requirements we have to do.
But that will not reduce our cash reserves.
No.
Okay. Who's up? I'm gotten lost.
okay. So
Okay.
Gene is gonna give us an update on the HERE program.
And please tell us what that is.
Here is through the Climate Commitment Act. It's the Home Electrification and Appliance Rebates Program through Commerce. It's the grant funding. We got $468,000 to cover panel upgrades and equipment. We have that contract ready to go. Kyle is out meeting with people, customers, sending out postcards. And he's going to be meeting with our contractors, putting together some information for them to explain how it works. So you'll be hearing more out in the public from our contractors and customers, hopefully soon.
And is Kyle our new energy efficiency person?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks. It's almost $500,000.
Yeah.
Nice. And it's intended to cover, well, you kind of mentioned things that to me sounded like taking substandard electrical situations and fixing them, but is it broader than that?
It is. It can cover panel and wiring upgrades for the customers as well as the appliances.
Okay,
So we're hoping to hit that side hard, and then when the RESP loan is available to hit the other side. for the
Okay.
Insulation and windows and things like that.
got it. Kevin?
So I have several things I'll go through real quick. There's some talk about the port taking over EDC. And it really wouldn't be necessarily the port, it would be the port, the city, the county, and the PUD. The port would hire someone to do the program. I think it's a good idea. It sounds like it would work. The ICG would be part of this group. More to come, but it is being talked about, and because it's being talked about at the commissioner's level, we're bringing it to you to let you know that it has been discussed, and I believe they will have a program ready to pitch to all the electeds in the ICG to see if this is something they'd be willing to move forward with.
Okay, and I saw that email, I think that was last week. You sent that out and I talked to Cindy Brooks and she hadn't heard of it, the executive director of the EDC. And so then I called Aaron Berg and he said he was kind of throwing it out there more as an idea. So it sounds like there's a lot of things that would need to be worked through.
I believe all four boards have been informed at this time.
But we
Talked
haven't,
to.
we haven't discussed it or discussed the ramifications of it or anything.
And I don't have a lot to even tell the board
Okay.
other than the email. It'll be something that comes up. But it is starting to gather a lot of discussion amongst
Okay, so it started with the executives and the executives are now communicating with their elected bodies.
Yep.
Okay,
So the county is the current I think it's ADO, is that the right term?
ADO, they assign the E EDC.
So is that something the county has to transfer over to the port or the PUD or whoever would want to take that on? Or can the port just unilaterally, offer or promote themselves to do that? What's the process? Just curiosity.
I don't know if it's everywhere, but our county would have to turn it over to the ports.
so it's a county assignment,
Some
basically.
places the ports do it. I believe there's 5 ports that run the EDC, but here the county assigns it.
Okay.
I'm a little confused. I thought I heard that the idea was for all 4 governmental entities to be involved with the operation of the EDC or the management of the EDC or supervision, rather than just the port.
The people would work for the port.
Okay,
The governing body would be the ICG.
okay.
There's some things to work out that would be interesting to see how it would happen.
And Ken, the conversation I had with Aaron Berg was, the way he stated it was he was hearing feedback from Kevin and from John Morrow that we're providing funding for the EDC, but maybe some of the measurables of what the EDC is doing, the PUD and the city might want to see some different measurables in terms of how successful is the EDC. So I think the idea would be that the staff would operate under the port, but because there would be this continued assumption of funding assistance from the other entities, that then those entities could basically say, here's kind of what we're interested in the EDC accomplishing. Here's some measurables that we'd like you to keep track for us of how you're doing. So I think that's where the idea of the ICG would come in, is giving feedback to the port of here's some of the things we care about, when you're gathering data or you're showing success. I think that's the idea. And when I talked to Cindy Brooks, she did acknowledge that having the EDC under the port could potentially help with some of the administrative costs and legal costs that the EDC otherwise has. So I think she was definitely open to the idea, but she hadn't heard about it, and she was, concerned about the staff that's taking a really long time to build the staff that they currently have that they feel are pretty effective, that they would be worried about does staff know where they stand in such a transition?
One more quick question, refresher. Now, was the executive director, was she retiring?
That's Cindy, and she is planning to retire, and they currently have kind of a job search that's going on, and they did look at an internal candidate and at that point didn't choose an internal candidate. So they're kind of in mid-process
So
on that right
if
now.
they're in midstream, would the port pick, refresh my memory, would the port pick the new executive director? Or
These are all to be decided.
Okay.
Can I answer part of that?
Sure.
This change would have to happen before somebody was selected, probably. There's a lot of things in play. If they don't have a director, now is the time to say, okay, this is something we want to look at. So that's part of the driving force right now, is Cindy's retirement, and is it time to make a change?
So more to be revealed.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Next thing on my list, and I just got this by email, we will bring it back to the board. If you recall, we were authorized to bid out the overhead fiber from Clallam County line back to approximately Fat Smitty's, very rough numbers. That bid came in yesterday, and we have the engineer's recommendation to go with a customer. So the low bid was less than engineer's estimate, which is a good thing for us.
I'm sorry, Kevin, I got distracted for just a moment. Which project is this on?
This is from along Highway 101
Mhm.
from Clallam County along the highway to Fat Smitty's.
Okay.
That stretch there.
This was the one we signed off on for 825,000 was the estimate, give or take, right?
No, this is the
Okay.
one for about 380,000. It's part of the in-betweens grant we're gonna
Okay.
talk about
And it's
later.
come in under,
Okay.
It came in considerably under.
it's great.
Cannon is apparent low. We believe we'll move forward with the recommendation to the board.
Okay.
So, but like I say, a lot of today's package came in emails after like 1, 2 o'clock this afternoon. So, that was very good news. Main reason I'm sharing it, it was 180,000 and the estimate was 380. So
Okay,
we
great.
did have some as high as 900,000.
Wow.
So it was quite spread.
So the number, was that ICPE on the electric side? Was that the one I'm thinking of?
No,
Okay.
no.
Seemed Like,
that was a different fiber bid for Highway 20 that
oh,
you're
okay,
thinking of.
okay. Okay.
This is something I will continue to talk to the commissioners about. I was in meetings today with the city and the county, the Builders Association. They put on a permits bill meeting once a month. Contractors attend, I attend, others do. Work in Jefferson County has slowed down. Permitting is quite a bit less than what it has been in the past. One exception is some work in Port Townsend for that new development.
Mm-hmm.
But it also has affected some of our local contractors. In the past, the PUD has tried remember 3 or 4 years ago, we tried to put some small projects together specifically to help with the contracting through some of these low periods.
When the COVID stuff was going
When
on.
COVID
Yeah.
stuff was going on. As staff, we're gonna recommend we do the same thing. We look at some smaller projects, not these big substations we've been talking
Mhm.
about, but smaller projects that need to be done that we can use local contractors for and try to help out some of the local workers here if we can.
And is this through like the small works roster
Could
kind
be
of
through the
tool?
Small Works roster.
Right.
It would be a combination of, there's a lot of small projects we just haven't taken the time to develop.
Okay.
Now we should take the
They're-
time to develop and try.
They're
to
saying
keep
they
them.
have capacity to do it. We're like, hey,
They do.
let's do it. Okay.
So what I'm kind of hearing is these would probably be projects that would fall under the threshold that have to come before the board.
Yeah, they wouldn't come before the board other than some.
So my
updates.
question is, and I agree with everything you're saying here, I think we should help support the local contractors as much as we can. It's a fairness issue. I don't know how long the list is, whether it's 10, 12, 14, how we're going to determine that there's an equity and a fairness in how we distribute that work.
It would still be bid out, so it'd be a bid process.
Okay.
We wouldn't just assign things to them, but we have, like I say, there's a lot of projects that we could start quickly putting packages together, get them bid out 50 to 100,000, and just keep small construction companies working that may not be able to.
And Kevin, just because we're in this process, we're going to talk about this later, this GM search process. The question that comes to my mind is, who else on our staff handles this kind of thing other than you?
In the future, all of the directors will be involved in these things.
Okay, so this is something that does need to be kind of worked through.
It does.
Yeah. Who handles it?
So if there's no question, I'm gonna jump real quick to the next one.
Okay.
We were hoping to get all of our documents to RUS on Thursday. We did receive back from ICP, our electrical contractors, all the changes for the 4-year work plan. The commissioners have seen some of the proposed moving around. So we will submit to RUS tomorrow. It is.
And this is the 4-year work plan.
This is the 4-year work plan.
Okay.
It's just a pre-conference. He
Yep.
reviews it, has questions, it goes back and forth. So that is moving better than we thought.
And this is separate from any ask of borrowing money. That would be a different process.
This is the first step to borrow money.
Okay.
Because he'll come through and then he'll say, your documentation, your numbers, everything is good to go. I will mention, on the rate discussions, the board talked to staff about maybe cutting some costs, not big projects.
Right.
So we did make some adjustments to cost, move some dollars around. It really does help our rate study.
Right.
And that's what will be sent to RUS. Once Dennis, our representative, signs off on it, then Mike and I will spend some time and actually download a lot of information on the RUS website. RD
apply.
So it's still a long process, but it's definitely, we've turned the corner.
Okay.
We feel very positive about it.
Good. Now that's a big hunk of work
So-
to
That
get
is.
done.
So with some of the tweaks you're talking about with this 4-year plan, my question is the way you're gonna shuffle or rearrange, determine maybe how much a project costs and push it out is kind of what you're talking about, the way I'm hearing it. Does it put us at any risk in the next 6 to 12 months beyond what we were already facing?
No,
For resiliency of the grid,
we're still,
especially during the storm season, October through February.
we're still moving forward with the transformer swap. This transformer swap buys us easy 2 years to do a lot of additional work. So the transformer swap isn't part of that 4-year work plan. It's projects we're funding out of reserves. So what we've talked about moving around, changing the dates, does not alter any of the key projects we have to get done. It's a more realistic schedule for the manpower we have and purchasing equipment. Transformers are 18 months, 2 years. Regulators are 18 months, 2 years. Breakers are 2 years. Just it does line better with what we can accomplish, and it helps the rates be a little bit more stable for the upcoming rate study.
Okay.
One last thing, my personal schedule. I'm going to the doctor Thursday afternoon. So I'll work a little bit in the morning, then I'll be in Silverdale. Friday, have to go back and they do my checkup. So I'm gonna be Thursday morning, I'll be here. Thursday afternoon, I'll be gone. Friday, I'll be in and out, primarily working from home because I think I'll have black eyes and all kinds of things, but I don't know. So, and that's the end of manager's report.
Okay. Any further questions from commissioners? Not seeing any. Let's go to commissioners report. And Dan, would you go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. So I attended the PPC member forum on March 5th. The director of CAISO and former BPA administrator Elliot Mainzer and several of his staff talked about the EIM, the Energy Imbalance Market, development of their EDAM market, and legislation related to that EDAM market that's currently working its way through the California legislature. The legislation is geared toward amending California statute requirements related to CAISO governance language. And basically that they're confirming that, so that the way it's set up now is CAISO is California centric. They're hoping to change this language in the governance to where CAISO is not bound to that standard, but there's a lot of discussion about how just whether or not this is actually going to solve the problem for that EDAM market. So again, that's kind of the 30,000 foot look at that. Okay. They also talked about some challenges with transmission congestion also in the markets, and how that would be confronted, handled, dealt with, on how, who pays for what and how much you have to pay and that sort of thing of getting the energy through the lines, when it needs to get through the lines. So that was another discussion. CAISO's presentation was geared forward towards their extended day ahead market. Like I said, a lot of the discussion revolved around EDAM more than it did the EIM, which is the existing market now that BPA belongs to. And they were trying to make the case for why their EDAM market's going to be the best option for the Western region, which relates back to the email that Tom Tiersch sent us last week about, why BPA is leaning towards Markets Plus versus the EDAM. That's one of a couple of the congestion on the lines, on the transmission side, the governance talk on the power side. That's some of the reasons why BPA is doing what they're doing. And I won't we could spend all day in detail on that. So that's as far as I'll go on that particular issue at the moment.
Okay.
I attended the PPC Executive Committee meeting on March 6th. John Hairston and BPA staff came in and they spoke about BPA's funding of the SPP Markets Plus extended day ahead market and BPA's intention to join that market once it gets stood up, which it's on a path for that to be the case. FERC has given them a go ahead to do the things they want to do. And again, on the other side of that, CAISO's EDAM faced a little bit of issues. I think it's Pacific Core had a tariff out there and that they ran into some issues with them entering into the EDAM market. So that just shows that there's some issues with EDAM that entities are running into where SPP is being formed a lot more around being more open and independent. So that's the 30,000 foot look again. Harrison confirmed that the Department of Energy has relaxed some of its workforce direction and the BPA was rehiring some of the laid off personnel. Retirees are still going to retire though. This was the people that were on, like 90-day, what's probationary and things like that, that it looked like they were going to get the majority of those people back. So things were headed in at that point, a couple of weeks ago, and I think they're still on that trajectory. The BPA is going to get more of their people back. So that's alleviated a few fears around the region over the staffing issues at BPA. PPC staff gave a report on the status of the BPA or BP 26 rate case and also projects that it's very likely this year, because of being a low water year, that there could very well be a power surcharge put on all the BPA customers at some point before the end of the year. And I don't have a number to attach to that of what that would be or what impact that would have on us.
And Dan or Kevin, could you clarify what that is? Is that what they would call a crack, or this is a power surcharge? What category does
when
this
their
fall into?
reserves fall below a certain
It's a crack.
amount, they want to make that revenue up. It'd be
Yeah.
like us just raising our rates, having the
Yeah.
ability to raise our rates at the drop of a hat, which I probably guess we could do. We wouldn't do that.
So they are looking at that this
They're
year.
looking at their reserves dropping below, I don't remember the number, if it was 200 million or what it was, but they're anticipating because of the low water and everything else that they're going to drop below their reserve,
And they're
which
gonna
that would automatically kick in the surcharge.
And they're anticipating having to buy more power from out of the area than they normally would, and being able to export less power and getting a cash bonus for that. Okay, so low water year equals less money, more likelihood of a crack. Okay.
But right now, that's the trajectory. They're estimating it, but 1 month could change that. It's a little early. I think maybe July or August, that's when I'd start to think about getting concerned. It was also noted that the final power contract terms will likely come in and they're going to be ready for have contracts ready. There's a comment period right now, but I think it's June is the deadline. And I think they're going to have the record of decision come out. And I think by the end of June, they're expecting they'll have contracts ready to be signed. Okay. And they're kind of pushing towards everybody doing it earlier rather than later for a lot of different reasons. So anyhow, that was PPC. I attended the BOC special meeting, discussed capital improvement for your work plan and funding options for that on March 11th. I attended the NOAANET meeting in Olympia on March 12th. I was in and out of that meeting. I know, Jeff, you probably have a little bit on
I
that.
don't have much on that one.
But
so
I
go
figure I'll
ahead.
wait till your report and we can discuss a few things.
I had like no notes on that meeting.
Yeah, well, again, we'll discuss it after everybody else gets a report.
Okay.
I attended the Waputa legislative update via Zoom on March 13th. I attended the BOC special meeting on March 14th. And that meeting on the 14th was aimed at the NRECA search team conferring with the BOC on the process to find a new GM. I met with Kevin Street on March 17th. I'm going to attend the Waputa monthly meetings on March 19th, 20th, and 21st. I will attend the Waputa quarterly water meeting on March 27th. And I meet with Kevin Street on March 28th. And that completes my report.
Okay. So since we brought up NOAANET, Was anybody else there that would like to report on anything of significance that they think we should be aware of?
I have a couple things.
Go ahead, Curtis.
Okay, yell here.
Kind of project, yeah.
The first really big item that I took away from it was the private LTE stuff that they're working on. I had a bit of conversations with Rich Hall from Benton PUD on private LTE for SCADA. So it's basically creating that private network between the various different substations, metering, that type of stuff. That's a cellular based 900 megahertz type of setup.
Yeah.
Kind of like the LoRaWAN stuff that we do with our meter reading, but better data rates.
Right.
So upwards of even 10 megabits per second up and down. So they're doing kind of beta testing with it now. So it's something that could be beneficial for us in the future. So we'll see how that pans out.
Okay.
So, and on that, so just I listened to that. I remember that got talked about when I was still on the board, last year, when this was the first meeting I'd been back to, and it triggered my memory that was something that was in play. And they described it fairly well between Benton and NOAANET staff. My question for you on hearing you talk about that is, you look at it something we may be able to use, and that wouldn't be a service by NOAANET. That would be something we would stand up and it would be our own. Is that how that would work? Did you able to figure that?
What I walked away with was that NOAANET is planning on it being a service that they provide, and it's another product, another arm. of what
Okay.
they're going for. The private LTE that they're working with is working on getting FCC licensing across the state of Washington.
Okay.
So I don't know how that plays out, but that's what they're testing right now as a potential revenue stream for them.
Okay, and I don't know if it's fair to ask, because again, I know you've only been to like 2 meetings, but could you foresee a timeline maybe? I know that Benton's doing the beta testing here on it or whatever. Do you have an idea what you think it would, how long it would take for us to where it might be something you get from NOAANET as a product? Any ideas?
I would venture to say that it's over 6-8 months before they know exactly how well it's going to work.
But relatively soon, all things being equal then.
Yeah, and
Okay.
what other private LTE providers in this area come up and what's going on, and whether or not it's even an enhancement to the LoRaWAN stuff on the SCADA side, that there could be additional competition that comes up with that. So it's a difficult line to walk, I would say, on when it's SCADA based control stuff, going out to electrical type stuff. So I'd like to see more details on security sides of all of that.
Okay. And yeah, I asked a couple of questions to try and understand exactly what it was they were talking about. And I'm guessing we'll probably hear more as they get further down the road with what is it, how might it benefit a PUD, how is security and control and other matters dealt with. Okay, thanks for that. Do you have any other things you want to report on?
What does LTE stand for?
Long-term evolution.
Yeah, that's like the 4G cellular type service is basically the same type of technology, except for this is at the 900 megahertz for the LTE. So it's sounding like it's going to be a co-resident FCC license that would go onto cellular towers and build that as a private infrastructure just for like utilities.
And they talked, Ken, a little bit about the megahertz. When it's in that range, it's not as good at going through trees, but it can handle a lot of data.
The 900
feet or whatever. I can't
The
remember.
900 was more penetration. It was the 2.2.
Oh, okay, I got it
The one that
backwards.
won't make it.
Reverse, but yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
900 megahertz, better penetration through trees and buildings and stuff because it's a longer wavelength,
Okay.
but your bandwidth is a little bit lower. So
But the data you're carrying isn't that much anyway, so who cares?
No, 10 megabits per second on a 900 megahertz is impressive,
Yeah,
actually.
okay. All right, anything else you want to comment on that
The
meeting?
other one was Craig's update on the membership criteria.
Mm,
So that was interesting for me on some of the slides that they had provided on where they're leaning towards, where he's kind of shifted from revenue based and going to product based, and how they're gonna either change the membership, enhance the membership, expand it, maybe not. I don't know, but there was pieces to it where they were thinking about other entities. I had tribal, county, other co-op, state, ports, economic development. that all could potentially get NOAA memberships
Mhm.
based off of this new program they're trying to put together by the end of the year.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, and again, they went through some bylaw stuff in that, and the bylaws got amended last year, and then this would be bylaw amendments maybe coming forward to get towards this new ownership question of how do you bring a new owner on, or when what's the requirements for being a current owner and that sort of thing. And so again, if the LTE was a product and we decided it made sense for us, we would take that, and maybe that gives you bonus points. I mean, I don't know how it's all gonna play out. That'll be up to you being on the board, you and Kevin,
Right.
as a member rep and the board rep, to
Right.
kind of watch that and keep us apprised of what that threshold is going to look like and what our input should be as to what does it mean to be a member of NOAA, what does that require?
Right. And I just set up an appointment with Curtis to get a little bit of a tour on Friday, and that'll actually be some of my questions about how we're working with NOAA now. So,
Because, I think NOAA should bring on new owners, new ownership, and they have the affiliate member program and other things and other ways. And there was some pushback on Craig's presentation, I think you heard it too, about whether certain entities really should be an owner or not. And there was some good discussion around that. So that I'm sure that'll get expanded. So,
well, Curtis, I'm glad you're going to those meetings, or listening in, going whatever combination, because I think just our engagement with NOAA matters. We have a stake in it, and then our broadband business. So I'm glad you're engaging and learning about those opportunities and issues.
yeah, just one last comment on the bylaws and the ownership and that. Again, I don't have a problem with NOAA putting some stipulations on there for needing services, but again, every utility is different. We're obviously really different because we were the first to take on the retail. So I don't think we should be penalized because we did that. The whole objective is to get this to everyone in the state. We're all working towards that. And so I don't want to see us kind of quote unquote get leveraged because we could pay for something we could do ourselves, right? So again, I think that's the key thing as you guys work through this process, that we keep that out there, that, hey, we'll take services if you can provide them, and like engineering, if you can give us engineering in a timely and affordable and competitive manner that we need, we'll do that. But if you can't hold it against us that we can't take your service because you can't meet our time. So there's going to have to be some give and take on this stuff. And I'm just throwing that one out there as what seems to me to be a simple example of why we maybe aren't using as many of their services. And Curtis would know better about what services we aren't using or we are. So I don't know that as a commissioner. You and I and Ken don't get into that level of depth. So
you're done with your presentation?
that's the thing,
Your
but
report?
that's
Okay.
why I didn't want to get too far into knowing it during the middle of my presentation, because there were a lot in that meeting. There was a lot of good work done, a lot of good discussion brought. That was one of the better knowing that meetings, in the 3 years I've been going really steady to knowing that. So
Ken, you want to go with your report?
Sure. On the 7th, I met with the general manager. On the 11th, I attended the special board meeting to review the 4-year plan. I also had conversation with resident of Calipoint, one of our customer owners who's concerned about costs. Had a conversation on the 12th with our consultant, Don McDaniel. On the 13th, I went for a site visit to the paper mill and had a good meeting with the CEO, Rob Kreisenbeck, and with Brian Peterson, who is a general manager. And they're very much interested in the partnership that we've established, and wanting to be cooperative with us. The concerns that they raised were twofold. One concern had to do with a couple of stands of trees on Fairmount Road that are hanging over transmission lines. They emphasize the point that when those transmission lines go down, they have to shut down their boilers. And as you know, we've experienced when we have an outage, you can't just bring everything online all at once. It has to be sequential. And the consequence for the mill is that it costs them $1 million when that happens, each time it happens. So they would very much like our assistance in doing the last bit of tree trimming that remains to be done. And they provided me with photos, and you can easily see that the trees are in a place where if they came down, they'd mess up the transmission lines.
Hey, Ken, question on that. So I had a conversation with Mr. Kreisenbeck a couple months ago on some of those same issues, and I also circled back to Kevin, and we talked about this a little bit at a board meeting. And what I understood from staff is that the PUD had trimmed those trees to kind of our normal standards, and if the mill wanted further trimming, the question was, should the mill or could the mill participate in that financially? Did that topic come up?
So they were asking that the PUD do the trimming, but they also indicated that they would be flexible. They first and foremost, they don't want to do anything that's going to undermine the relationship that we have with them. And I could clearly see from the photos that, and Kevin and I talked about it, and Kevin said that he'd taken a ride down Fairmount Road and was able to see that those trees remain in place. So not all the trimming has been done, and why it hadn't been done initially, I'm not sure whether it was just a cost factor or whether it was an easement issue.
I guess, and just to close that out, Kevin, would you be willing to comment on that? Just so the rest of the board knows where we stand on that issue with the mill and the trees.
Yes, and I'm gonna send the mill an email. Scott and I are gonna go there tomorrow. I was there over the weekend. There are some trees that we have asked to remove, but one of the parcel owners, and I found this out today, Ken, so this is new information. Parcel owner will not allow us to. So there's some things we can do, but what we did is we brought in Asplin, Right Tree, I can't even remember which contractor. They brought in a special bucket to go the 150 feet in the air. But these trees are taller than what they can reach with a bucket, so we're gonna have to have them climb the trees. We'll have a plan tomorrow to look at what we can do. I agree with Ken. I think we need to try to partner with the port and
Mill.
or excuse me, the mill, not the port. Partner with the mill, but without spending some time on site with Scott and the new information that we gathered today. I don't have costs or anything
Okay,
like
so we're
that.
still working on it.
Well, the work that we could do and what we normally do has been done. But there's some additional things that can be done, and we'll review those tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to interrupt you, Ken. I just wanted to kind of get
That's all right.
on that.
So the other point that they raised, it's really important to them for the communication between the PUD and the mill to be a bit tighter. So they emphasize that point. And the tour of the mill was interesting. As someone who has worked in a steel mill many, many years ago, looking at that very large manufacturing facility, which in fact is over a century old. It was impressive. So on the 14th, I attended the meeting with Lee Taylor of NRECA regarding the search for a new general manager. I met with Kevin on the 17th, 19th, 20th, and 21st. I will attend as I can the WAPUTA meetings. And I have a meeting 8 o'clock in the morning on the 21st, being part of the awards committee. So I look forward to that. I'll meet again with Kevin on the 25th and also on the 28th. Although we may want to tweak that schedule, Kevin. And that's my report.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to start my report acknowledging the passing of a really close friend of mine who the PUD worked with at the city. John McDonough died last Friday, and he had worked with the city, I think, for over 20 years. I've known him since college, and he'll be missed. On the 6th, and I guess he was Irish, so it's appropriate. He passed near St. Paddy's Day, so thoughts to John and his family. On the 6th, attended a EDC board meeting. They're working on their executive director search process. They're concerned about the loss of federal grants that had already been funded, and Kevin talked about possible changes to that organization that we might be a part of in the future. So that's a work in progress. Also had a phone conversation with Angela Bennick of Kitsap PUD to ask them a little bit about what their transport rates are, because when we had our broadband rate discussion and adopted those broadband rates, one of the issues was the 10 gig transport rate, which was proposed at $2,000 a month, and we adopted that. And for existing customers, that doesn't go into effect until the end of the year. What Angela told me is that's the same rate they charge. However, that side of their business is shrinking, and they're getting significant downward pressure on those rates. And so it brought up the question to me of, okay, we've heard that our rates are in the middle of the range. That may not be the case. So maybe some more discussion on that in the future. On the 10th, I listened to a talk. This is out of the Harvard Kennedy Business School. They have these experts that talk once a week. And this one was interesting because it was an economist who is Chinese background, lives in the US, but this question of the relatively low cost of nuclear power in China and how China can build their plants and what the cost of that energy is. The question is, could that be replicable in other parts of the world? And he had lots of data on what he could determine the cost of power from nuclear in the US is, and we're like the most expensive country to build nuclear power. France is better. I think theirs was like 4 cents a kilowatt, and ours was quite a bit higher. And China's was like 2 cents a kilowatt hour or something like that. And his answer was no, it's not replicable. And it's because China has a skilled but very low cost workforce, and they have a very unique supply chain that allows them, access to less expensive concrete, steel, and everything. And his example was they built a plant in Pakistan, and they could not do it for the same price they do it in China. So anyway, just for those of us interested in nuclear power, it was kind of an interesting discussion. Let's see, I attended the meeting we had on the 11th on the 4-year work plan. I listened into the NOAANET meeting. Thanks, Dan and Curtis, for more notes on that. I met with Leo Boyd on the 13th, and he had been making comments about our transport rates, our broadband transport rates. It was a really helpful meeting. I think I understand how everything works, the infrastructure and the business model that he's trying to pursue and the customers he has. I'm going to meet with Curtis on Friday to kind of get a better sense of how it works for us. So I hopefully will be able to brief the board more about, I think, what the issues are and how it works. And hopefully it'll help us as we continue with these broadband rates discussions. I was part of the GM search meeting we had with Enrica on the 14th, on the 19th. Looking ahead, so tomorrow, Kevin, are we on for our phone call tomorrow as far as you know? Okay. I'll listen into the Waputa meetings from the 19th through the 21st. The Climate Action Committee has a meeting on the 25th I plan to participate in. I'll probably listen in to the Energy Northwest meetings on the 26th and 27th. And on the 27th, we also have an NODC meeting, and that is my report.
One quick follow-up with your, on the rates that you talked about with Angela.
Yeah.
And our rates.
Yeah.
And then Curtis, if I could call on Curtis real quick. There was some talk about rate compression in the business model or the prices that NOAANET charges. Is that all, are we talking about, are those all the same things converging? That the lack of or the reduction in Kitsap's business and what NOAANET's seeing in prices in the competition in the market and the prices that we did, are those things all converging? Or is that the same thing, or is it apples and oranges?
A little bit. There's new technologies that have come out that the traditional transport to connect site A to site B to site C is fizzling out with these newer technologies, software defined wide area networks and things of that sort, where you just need redundant internet access at each of those locations. And you can have site A, site B, and site C connect together with internet access and have it look like I pulled a wire from site A to site B. So with those new types of technology, the transport, and I'm sure that's what Kitsap is feeling with this, is that there's less demand for it because this new technology off of internet-based circuits where you can have cellular, broadband, ponds, whatever, you can connect things together and make it look like I've got that wire connected. So I think that's a part of the shift.
Again, I'm trying to understand this. This is something that is all Greek to me.
Yeah.
So I guess the takeaway is obviously Kitsap utilizes NOAANET 100%, 90%, I don't know. And so we do our own thing because the retail and building our own network. Will it affect us the same way as it affects Kitsap?
No, because Kitsap, the way I understand it from speaking with Angela, is they were doing a different type of internet access to their residential and business customers. We call it active Ethernet. That takes typically 2 strands of fiber versus 1. And
With the PON network.
versus the PON network, which is what they're changing to, because as they were building that out, they found out financially by the time they got into like 2026, 27, that that old style of network wasn't gonna work for them.
And that's Kitsap you're talking about.
Kitsap,
Okay.
yes, Kitsap specifically.
Well, we started out that way, right? And then we switched to PON very early on, right? Or no?
Knowing that when they built the B-top grant was Active E, which is one fiber, one house.
Yeah, so Kitsap has been changing from that Active E solution. I think they started last year, from what I understood from Angela, to the Calix solution with doing PON-based services, which is way more cost effective to build out. So that's a shift in their model for sure. So different technologies that are coming out that affect the whole transport component. And they've changed their business model from where they started in 2016.
And Kitsap is really pushing the residential customer connection as the future of their revenue because of these large customers declining. You know, the schools and the big commercial ones are declining. So they're looking at the residential ones as what they really want to
So
focus
the
on.
crystal ball question I want to kind of throw at you a little bit is Jeff talked about us revisiting the rates that we just ratified or codified there a while back. Do you see us being able maybe to do that, or do you think we're okay?
I do, because I think that we're gonna have some of those components that are gonna come in on how we could get transport to other areas. I also know that there's gonna be additional competition, right?
Yeah.
Things that others are doing, right? Such as things that they talked about in Kitsap's area with competition that's being done, other infrastructures that are being put in. So I think there's change that'll happen in the future for sure.
I think one of the things I talked to Leo about was, as a commissioner, I worked in the solar industry. So when we talk about electricity, I feel like I understand it fairly well, you know, for a commissioner. And when you talk about water and sewer, that's pretty straightforward. The broadband stuff and the communication stuff is really different. And that, to me, I'm looking forward to learning more about it because as just from my perspective, it's hard to be, talking about these rates if you don't feel like you really understand the services that we're providing. So, and on the broadband rates, we're probably going to have to adjust them on a fairly frequent basis just because of the nature of the business. So it's one way or another, we're going to see these things coming back,
It'll be something that's gonna be revisited, especially as additional infrastructures come in. I mean, you just look at the change in technology and what's happened in the last 10 years. It's extreme.
Yeah, and
we're gonna see a lot of that. That's gonna be probably a couple of times a year that we're looking at this stuff.
And I'll just probably speak for myself and the rest of the board. We appreciate your patience in explaining these things to us because it is not our normal area of understanding. Okay, so that's my report. So if there's no further questions, I'll move us on to the consent agenda. And did staff have any changes to consent agenda? Seeing none.
So
Commissioners,
I'll
are we
make the
okay?
motion to accept the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the consent agenda. All in favor of the consent agenda, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. Okay, consent agenda is approved. Old business, we've scratched the MRSC resolution. That'll come back to us. 8.2 base fee exception.
And you'll notice there is no documentation with the base fee exception. This is, I'm gonna say my recommendation and staff's recommendation. And we're just gonna talk through some stuff today. In a future meeting, we'll bring back some documentation. So part of the exception that we're looking at for a base fee is when there's multiple meters on a single piece of property.
And we're talking residential.
Residential.
Yeah.
On the residential side, there's approximately 3,000 plus meters or residents with 2 meters. So if you just take the base fee and you cut that in half for those, it's a budget killer. It is, it would really affect the rates. The second thing that we have looked at, or that I've looked at, is, depending on how the construction is done, if there's a meter on the house and a meter on the barn, and a lot of these are built that way. It's meter on the house, meter on a barn, meter on a house, meter on a garage, meter on the house, meter on a doghouse, well house. So there's reasons they built them this way. There are some meters with like 2 meters on one house. Usually that means it's a duplex, or if there's 3 meters, it's a threeplex. So the part that starts costing us money, not only if we would take those 3,000 meters, times that by $30 a month, $600,000. But the cost is what we look at. For example, from the transformer to the house, there's a wire. And there's capacity on the transformer for that house. There's also a wire from the transformer to the garage, for example. And those are what goes into the rates. It's not necessarily how much electricity is used at each site, but it is taking our total capacity and looking at what it takes to do the maintenance, to do the work, to do the upgrades. So in a lot of these situations, we have 2 meters. We always have 2 wires going to separate buildings. If the wire fails going to the garage, we have to roll a crew just as quick as we do as if it fails going to the house. So our costs are the same if they have 2 meters. Now, there are some locations that the customer has to have 2 meters. For example, on Marrowstone Island, there's a road going down Marrowstone Island, and the house, a lot of those lots are split in half. So the house is on the water side, and they have a shop or a garage on the island side. You can't, a private individual can't put a underground wire underneath the road. The county won't permit it, so the PUD has to do that. So in those locations, is truly 2 separate connections based on the need of the county. The reason the county makes the PUD responsible to put the second meter over there is for locates, and then if there's damage to the road, let's say the backfill isn't done, the PUD is responsible to go in and refix the road and those kind of things. And those, again, are additional costs the PUD has to maintain and support. So we understand in the case that we're looking at here, there's 3 meters on the property. 2 meters are side by side. There's 1 wire going to those 2 meters. That's something we could look at. We still don't think as a PUD we should do it. Combine them in the software is what we're talking about doing, is taking those 2 meters, combining them in the software, and maybe not giving them a complete break for the second base fee, but a break for the second meter. We've looked at this, or I've looked at this. I just don't think we should. In the past, we have told people if they need to combine those 2 meters, they have to pay to combine them. And they've done that.
To physically have an electrician come and do the customer side of it so that the PUD can switch it to 1 meter.
1 meter.
Yeah.
And I did reach out to a local electrician, local company, and in the last couple of years, the requirements have changed quite a bit to upgrade a panel, which means the costs have gone up. So in the past, if it's an older meter base, they have to bring it up to current code, and that's where a lot of the costs are. A lot of times a 2-pack meter base for a duplex, to change that out easily could be $4,000. A little less, but throwing a dart at the board, you would say 4,000 to change it out. If it was a newer install where you were closer to code, it would be quite a bit less, but that's the numbers they gave me for a meter, or a combination meter be changed to a single meter. So we've looked at it from a lot of angles. We will hopefully get some discussion from the board and bring something back at the next meeting where we can look at actual dollars. But staff's recommendation is to keep the fees the way they are presently. We did do a poll of Waputa, and all other PUDs, if it's 2-pack meters, for example, they charge 2 base fees, or garage house, they charge 2 base fees.
So clarifying question, Kevin, what I heard you say, you were talking about when you've got 3 meters and 3 wires to each meter, you're making the argument about how the PUD could have costs associated with that. And then you acknowledge that in some cases like this one where they've got the 2 meters on the house, but there's just 1 feeder wire feeding that, and then it's split and runs through those 2 meters. You made it sound like you were open to looking at some sort of a break for one of those meters. Could you elaborate on that?
I'm not open per se to that argument, but I do think that is an argument that if I'm out there, I would make.
Mm-hmm.
Our argument coming back to the customer is the there isn't two wires going there, but the wire's a little bit bigger. So the costs are a little bit higher for us to maintain, but it's definitely different than two separate wires to two buildings. And so we acknowledge, I acknowledge that that is something that we can discuss, you know, how the board wants to handle those. Actually, this is a board decision on, you know, do we change our policy? Because our policy today says for every meter, there's a base.
Right. And the board hasn't seen this because I was trying to work with staff and offer them some ideas and let them decide whether they wanted to carry them forward or not. And it sounds like you haven't. So I drafted some language that would create a process which would say which ones could ask for a reduced meter fee for in excess. You know, if you've got one meter and then you got more than one, and it was, you know, combination of not being over 320 amps and none of the meters are serving accessory dwellings, you know, a bunch of different things that would kick out a lot of different issues and would limit it really to kind of like the well or the garage or the situation you mentioned on Maristone, maybe where who knows if it's a septic system or the well's on one side of the street and the house is on the other side, that those could possibly be that, but it would be an application process they go through. I guess from my perspective, I feel like until we have FCS here and I can ask FCS, what is your assumption of a meter base fee? You know, when you say this is the number, $32 or $28 or $35 is each customer's share of what they should pay. What is your assumption? You know, okay, if this person has a house and a well and they're not here and we kind of gave, what's our fellow's name? Sergey, we give him a heads up that when they come back. So for me, I'm not really ready to fully discuss this, but I do appreciate that staff has thought more about it and is offering more information. So I'll stop there. And John Capps sent me an email about this, and I don't know if he's on the line tonight, but we'll start with commissioner questions or thoughts at this point. So anyway, I'm at the point where I'm not ready to say I oppose it or I support it because I feel like from Sergey, I need to understand what's his assumption of what that fee is for. Should, you know, a house with a garage and 2 meters pay 3 of them? So other gentlemen, Ken and Dan, if you have any thoughts at this point.
Well, I don't know how far, well, go ahead, Ken.
Well, I'd be very reluctant to make any policy changes, given the fact that we're looking at serious revenue issues, and to open that door or put us as commissioners in the position of having to adjudicate again and again and again different situations, I don't welcome being in that position. I'm sympathetic to Mr. Capps. I understand. You know, you're talking about an additional, arguably an additional $30 a month that he could save. And if the cost, if he's got an older dwelling and the cost, as Kevin was suggesting, is about $4,000, it would take him well over 10 years to recover that. And that's based on the assumption that we don't change the meter fee in the next year or 2 or 3. So it's a difficult question, I think. But as far as changing the policy to allow additional exceptions, I'm very reluctant to do that.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. If we're so far down the rabbit hole with this rate study and, you know, staff being pressed as it is to figure out 3,000 meters. I mean, that's going to take us some time. So I don't, timing wise, I don't know that the policy change would, like you said, we end up still adjudicating these things one by one by one by one because someone would feel like they're not, the policy doesn't capture them. So I think right now I'm in Ken's camp. This is something is on the radar now. We know it's an issue we have to deal with. Maybe we can get some more data, a little more granularity as to just how many people this is really going to impact at the end of the day, unless we already know that. Do we know that? We do not. So again, to set the policy and then every meeting have someone come in mad because we changed it and now we got to change it again and again. I'd say we leave it alone and if they want to come in and be mad about it, I guess that's still their prerogative. But I think it's on our radar. It's something we know if we have the capacity, staff capacity to deal with. Doesn't sound like this is something a consultant would help us. This is something we need to do on our own. I mean, is a consultant another option here to work on this? Cost effectiveness. Again, we got to look at, does that make sense from a dollar amount? Or is it something we should do in-house? I mean, I guess I need a little more information about what it's going to take to get us to a point where if we make a policy change, it just doesn't create a whole nother problem.
Well, let me ask a question. So Gene and Kevin, I shared with you a proposed criteria, which to me would limit the folks who could apply to significantly below 3,000. And it would be a process that staff would administer. The applicant would have to apply for it. Would have to pay a fee, would have to provide us the information to show how many meters, what are they serving, what are the amps, what are the uses. And so if you had something like that in place, I guess the concern I have is I feel like we don't have full information on this. And what I'd prefer we do is to wait until we have the rate study started till Sergey comes back to consider this issue at that point and be able to ask Sergey the questions about the base fee, his assumptions on it. Because I think it could be something we could do. It wouldn't come to the board other than if we adopt a policy, as Dan says, and then they say, well, the policy doesn't work for me, make it instead of 320 amps total, it needs to be 500 amps. And my arguments, you guys haven't seen the policy, only staff has, the proposal I came up with. To me, it made sense. And if I was a staff member having to administer it, I feel like, okay, this is pretty direct. It seems like it could be done. And I don't think I'd be surprised if we got more than 150 of these folks. And to me, we wouldn't be getting them off scot-free. They'd still pay a reduced fee for the second and third meters if they have more than 2 additional. But that would be intended to cover exactly the kind of cost Kevin's talking about. It's just that I don't know that they, and again, I don't want to take a ton of time with this right now. But
And the one thing that causes me some concern, and I did talk to Joel about this, is we're making a subset of the residential class, and I'm afraid this isn't I don't know how you make it equitable. I believe it could be looked at as this class you're talking about making is, I don't know how you could limit it. Even with some of the verbiage you had, Jeff, I think there's going to be the customers that come in and say, I'm no different. I have 2 meters. You can't discriminate against.
Well, again, the other board members haven't seen this. It's not creating a class. It's just saying if you've got more than 1 meter, and the meters total less than 320 amps, they are multiple meters serving accessory uses such as well houses, garages, and other non-commercial structures that are accessory to the primary use as a single-family dwelling. Transient residential units, separate dwelling units, separate businesses don't qualify. For me, it is defining the uses and it's bringing it back to what somebody could do with 1 meter. Because through 1 meter, you can serve 320 amps. If you physically could have run a sub-circuit to that well, you would have, but there's a road in the way. You would have run it to the garage, but it hasn't, and it's acknowledging it's really freaking expensive, you know, and 4,000, they said it could be up to 10, you know, so it's a range of very expensive dollars to do it. But again, I feel like it's premature right now to reach a conclusion, as that's how I feel. I'd like us to keep our minds open. I'm hearing that your reluctance to do it, but when we get to it, I'd like to ask Sergey that question. I'd like to show you the language I came up with and then decide. Ken.
I'd like to say one thing, that one of the concerns, and I have more than one, is the law of unintended consequences here.
What's that?
The law of unintended consequences here.
Okay. Well, I'm concerned about the law of fairness.
Well,
Ken?
I respect that, and but fairness has to work in all ways.
Right. Ken?
Yeah, that's the point that is on my mind as well, that if you give a certain group, I won't say class, a certain group of customers a break, then you're having other customers subsidize them. And I don't think that is fair. But I have another question. I don't want to argue this point any further tonight. Jane, you mentioned a program earlier, the HERE program.
Yes.
So if this particular customer were to spend the money to consolidate, would that be eligible for any kind of subsidization?
Probably not from here. That is something that RESP could no?
I don't think so.
No?
No, I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna say no too. We can look into it, but I don't think it would qualify right off.
Well, the rest had a pretty long menu of things you could do, and we went with a fairly short one. So again, that, and one more reason to forestall this a little bit is to maybe look at RESP and see if there is something we can do within RESP that would capture some of this. Maybe that's a possibility. I don't know. Because I don't recall, I know we only picked like a menu of about 50. We picked like 10, right, of things we could do with the RESP.
And staff does think this should come back to the board.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I hear Joel has concerns. I guess without seeing the language, I would like us to hold off on this, wait till we get to the fee, the next rate study point when Sergey comes back to us. But
That would be super helpful to see.
the higher we push these base fees, this issue gets worse. So that's just a heads up, guys. This issue is not going to go away. And that's one reason why I wanted us to try and take it on and come up with a way that secondary meters maybe have a reduced rate. But anyway, so it's not going to go away, and we're going to wait.
Yeah, two things. I think a knee-jerk change in policy. We're nowhere near having enough background and due diligence and information, to make a policy change. So again, a lot more has to happen before I would be on board with a policy change. And you are right about we already know, we had the presentation a few days ago about what our rates are going to look like. And I just don't see any way that that's not going to impact the base rates. Yeah. Our base rates are going up.
And we
There's no two ways around it.
And we know we have 3,000 customers with more than one base fee. Okay. Is this one dead for tonight? And John Capps, I don't think you're on the line. I was going to give him a chance to chime in if he's there, but I'm not seeing a hand. Okay. This will come back. And so the next one is 8.3, the in-betweens fiber grant engineering contract change order.
So this change order is very similar to the change order we did for the Quilcene area. Finley Engineering has had a change order for $225,000. The change order, I can go over a lot of this, how that fee is accounted for. This would complete this project completely with Finley Engineering, and it is covered by the grant. So it's not out of pocket money. The reason these fees have gone up, and we changed the scope of work on Finley. We added drop service to the house, which means from the road you get to the house, they do the mapping, the plow, the design, and then it seems like a simple job, but you have to meet with every homeowner. It's very time consuming. There was also a couple design changes along 101. Originally, we looked at going overhead, but to meet the state's requirements, we were gonna have to change out almost every pole through there. So we backed off, looked at underground, which was really expensive. In a nutshell, we got, as you remember, we went to the state and they agreed to work with us in these areas so that the clearances, we didn't have to change out the poles. So those are the kind of things that caused this change order to come about. We did require Finley to do additional work. I'm comfortable with this. Like I say, it's very similar to what we did last time for these two grants are running simultaneously. So we're asking for the board to approve me to sign the change orders.
Okay, and I'm just looking at the bottom line here. The original in-betweens was 1.08 million, and this would move it to 1.3 million, 1.33. Okay. Commissioners, do you have any questions? Seeing none. Questions of the public or public comments on this one? Not seeing any hands. I will entertain a motion. If somebody wants to make a motion, there is a recommendation here to approve a motion to authorize the general manager to sign a change order number 2.
I'll make the motion to authorize the general manager to sign change order number 2, increasing the cost by $225,720 and extending the engineering completion date from December 31st, 2024 to June 30th, 2025.
Second.
Okay, just a quick question. And I didn't see this covered in here. This doesn't endanger in any way our grant completion timeline, does it? Okay, so we're still okay with our contract and everything else. It's just the cost of implementing it. Okay. And was this one going to be reimbursed by the state too? Okay, so it's no cost to us. Okay.
Cost to the PUD.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. Thank you for getting that through. And let's see, review the general manager's job description and advertisement. So this relates back to the meeting we had with Lee Taylor of NRACA last Friday. A draft, and again, it's not really the job description, is it? It's really the posting. It's the posting of it. So I got a little confused there. So we have a posting in front of us. There's some blanks in there for staff to complete, like what's our annual revenue? How many employees do we had? She had 50 on there. I knew that was low. I just said it's somewhere upwards of 70. Melanie and Kevin, can you comment on where we're at with this? And I guess Joel, what is being asked for tonight? That the board signs off on the job posting, or we sign off on authorizing staff to edit it and make it happen? Where are we at?
Can I jump in, Kevin? Is that okay?
Sure.
So I think the most efficient, effective way to get this published is to provide any additional guidance that the commission wants on the posting, and then pass a motion that authorizes the general manager to complete it consistent with the direction you've given him tonight. And that way you've authorized the posting, and, there's some key things in there, like the salary and things like that. And then Kevin and Melanie, and to the extent they need any help from me, I'm happy to do that, can publish it, finalize it, and then we can advertise it. I think we're looking at trying to advertise sometime next week. Is that right?
Yeah.
Like the 24th, maybe?
24th. Yeah. Is that right, Melanie?
You're muted, Melanie.
Keep talking, see if we can hear you. No,
Still not.
you can just give us a thumbs up if the 24th is the right date. Thumbs up. There we go.
Okay, good.
Well, I saw the draft that Lee put out on Monday, and I sent my comments to her. I read through it. She incorporated my comments, so I'm okay with it. Dan?
Did the same thing. There was a spelling change, and I referred a few numbers that I thought could be updated. So I'm fine as we go through this conversation. If I'm comfortable with Melanie and Kevin filling in the number of employees, the benefits we offer, those sorts of things, because it's all done. That works there. It's not like we need to reinvent the wheel or anything. We just got to put it in the document. So
And-
I'm fine with deferring to Melanie and Kevin where they need to fill in those blanks.
Yeah, and then it's kind of hard to catch, but it's on the very last page at the bottom of the page. She had a blank for revenue. She had a number of employees, which now doesn't match this. And it says 50 on the bottom of the last page, and it says 70 in the body of the main thing. So just catch those things. Ken.
Yes. I want to recommend a wording change. The language in the very first paragraph that on my copy is green. It says, we're looking for someone with a solid track record of developing and empowering employees and a solid grasp of financial understanding. I think that should be a solid grasp of finances.
Which sentence is that, Ken? Oh, there we go. It's that green in the very first paragraph.
Yes.
And a solid grasp of finances instead of a solid grasp of financial understanding. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Dan, does that sound okay to you?
Yeah, I'm fine with some wordsmithing.
Solid grasp of finances to serve as our next general manager. Was that the only additional change you had, Ken?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Staff, any thoughts on this? Does that sound okay if we authorize you to add any other edits to correct numbers? And then I think it needs like a picture or something. There's like a checkerboard thing.
There is one other thing we needed to discuss that Lee wanted us to discuss, and that is the NRECA, what's it called? MIP program.
Oh, that
she wanted us
intern thing.
Yeah, and I sent my comments, and she basically put my comment in there, referred to it as being more generic rather than going with the MIP, which is NRECA's own training. What's the actual term they use for it?
Well, one says completion of an advanced leadership development program is preferred.
Right, and that was kind of the language I sent. So I figured that would make anyone who's within NRECA and has that, they're going to put that in their resume.
You and I, Ken and I have already said okay.
Yeah. So the thing is she wanted us to basically say whether she should put that MIP reference in there, and I don't think we need it.
Are you okay with the current language, or do you want something different? That's what I'm confused about. It says completion of an advanced leadership development program is preferred, is what she has in there now. And that's neutral as to whose advanced leadership program it is, instead of referring to NREC.
Right.
Generic.
I think that's what Lee wanted.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Or wait till
yeah, she says, also, I'd like guidance on the advanced leadership program and if I should keep in MIP. And she incorporated the language I termed, which was more generic, that it's desirable to have some form of advanced leadership training.
Okay, so here's the language. It's a sub-bullet under experience and expertise. And one of the bullets just says completion of an advanced leadership development program is preferred.
Right.
You're okay with that?
I am.
Okay.
Ken's okay with
that? That's what the direction she was looking for was whether or not to put that MIP reference in there.
It's not in there.
Right. It was originally. She took the language I sent and inserted it. So I'm fine with the language that's in there.
Okay. So I think what would be helpful, in addition to if we direct staff to proceed and make corrections, is once you're done, if you could just send whatever the final version is to the three of us. And if we catch anything else that's weird in there, we can get right back to you. But go ahead. I will entertain a motion to, direct staff to proceed with this so we can stay on our timeline. But whenever you're done with it, maybe just shoot it back just so we know what's going out. So commissioners, do we have a motion? Oh, we got Melanie. I don't know if your audio is working yet, but
Got on the phone.
Can you hear me now?
yes, we can hear.
Yes.
Perfect. So the one other question I had for the board was, it sounds like you will be giving staff the approval to go ahead and make changes on the job posting. And I wanted to know if you also want me to make changes to the general manager job description based off of the job posting, because there's some qualifications that looked like were changed from the original job description. So if you'd like, I'm happy to go in and make those changes to the job description.
I think that makes sense. And again, maybe bring that back to us in just an informational point at one of the future meetings, just to say, just so we know how it's tracking.
Yeah.
And Ken gave a thumbs up to
Yeah,
that.
you harmonize it. Yeah, definitely.
And I think what we're asking though is not to have staff make changes to the language that's here, but for staff to fill in the blanks where it says, for example, General Manager, Jefferson County Public Utility District number 1, in parentheses, Kevin and Melanie to update picture below, those things. And it's got that in several places. Kevin and Melanie to update, I would like to add revenues, about Jefferson County PUD. So where you're specifically called out or where it's clearly not, done, like on the bottom of the last page, please correct those, but please don't make other substantive
Yeah,
changes.
and those are known numbers and known,
Right.
benefits or whatever. So
Right.
it's not like you're creating anything.
Okay. Do you have
Yep,
anything
understood.
else,
Thank you.
Melanie? Okay, so can we get a motion?
So let me
There's nothing, you just
take a
have to-
shot at that. So I move that the Board of Commissioners authorize staff to make revisions to the job posting and ensure consistency between the job posting and the job description, and other editorial changes as discussed, and to then provide the revised documents to the Board of Commissioners. How's that?
Pretty good. I think you captured it all. I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the general manager's posting with staff edits consistent with our discussion. All in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. Okay, thank you. And our last one is new business 9.1 rules for records requests resolution and resolution updating public records officer designation. Who's leading us on this one? Everybody's looking at everybody.
Okay.
I can do that. I
Melanie,
can lead us on
You
it,
want to?
unless Kevin wants to.
You want to go?
Potato.
You want to go, Melanie?
Melanie, you can do it.
We can't hear you.
You're muted again. Whatever tin can and string method you figured out, call it out again.
Flashcard.
Okay, am I working now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. So we are presenting the records rules to the board along with a resolution. And what we have presented to you tonight is just some necessary changes that need to be made immediately. Designating Laura Fabian as the public records officer. And then I will be designated as the backup for public records on a temporary basis. And we'll update that in the future. But we would like to have on record that Laura is our official public records officer. And then her and myself are reviewing those rules right now. And we'll most likely make some changes to it. We'll of course submit it to Joel for his approval and then bring it back to the board when we're ready to present that.
Okay,
So tonight, just the designation.
So my understanding is with the retirement of Annette Johnson, we needed to designate a new public records request officer, and we've also got a backup person. This resolution would take care of that. Tom Tiersch saw, I don't know if you saw this, or he forwarded some more comments and concerns. We're going to address those separately. It sounds like with an additional, once we've reviewed everything, figure out what additional changes are needed, and that'll be addressed at a future meeting. But staff is recommending we proceed with this to deal with the needing to appoint new staff for the role that Annette has filled for so long.
So I'll make the motion that the Board of Commissioners of Public Utility District Number 1 of Jefferson County appointing a new public records officer for the PUD and revising resolution number 2015-008.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have any further discussion by the board? Not seeing any comments from the public. We have a motion and a second adopting the resolution. Please indicate if you are in favor of the motion by saying aye.
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 Aye. The resolution is passed. Okay, we have reached the end of our agenda. It is 5:41. This is probably our shortest board meeting that we've had in a really long time. So thank you, everybody, and have a good night. We are adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night, all.
Everyone.
Good night.